Thank you very much. As Brandon said, my brief role today is to provide an overview of the context of storytelling and archiving related to the conflict in and about Northern Ireland. Over the next 2 days, we're going to hear from wonderful international speakers about their experiences of collecting personal accounts of conflict and human rights violations and making those stories available. We have a wide range of delegates in the audience today, some of whom are very familiar with the work of storytelling in Northern Ireland, and a number of whom I've had important and challenging conversations with on this topic over the years. But also those that are less familiar with the level of story gathering which has taken place, and we felt it was important to contextualise some of that today. We also hope to take this opportunity to acknowledge the quality and depth of the story gathering which has taken place, and also to pay tribute to the courage of those people that have chosen to tell of their experiences of the conflict and share them more widely. And that's the important thing that we can't forget about this whole day, the amount of courage that it takes people to share of their experiences. But this is where I must take a short pause to talk about terminology, because it's an elephant in the room if we don't talk about it. So far, I've used the term personal accounts and storytelling in relation to this work. We in the project team, however, are very aware that there's no agreed or wholly accepted term which encapsulates the work of gathering people's personal experiences of conflict, or the troubles as some would prefer that we call it. For some people, the term stories and storytelling is problematic, as it may imply that there is some fictional element to the accounts they're giving. For others, references to the tradition of storytelling in this part of the world is helpful in explaining people's willingness to share their experiences. Despite this, many projects do use the term storytelling, and it's important to acknowledge that, to describe what they do. This language has also found its way into proposals for dealing with the past, policy documents, and funding priorities. Others prefer terms such as testimony, narrative, or simply oral history to describe this type of work, and we acknowledge all of those complexities around the language. In this project, we've attempted to use the terms interchangeably and have adopted a definition proposed by Healing Through Remembering in 2005, that it is a project or process which allows reflection, expression, listening, and possible collection of personal, communal, and institutional stories related to the conflict in and about Northern Ireland. In the winter following the 1994 ceasefires, the County Down poet and playwright Damien Gorman wrote an article which was published in many local newspapers and magazines at the time. The article began, and I'm quoting, "Rightly or wrongly, I have a sense that we're beginning to come to, that Northern Irish people are emerging from paralysis, with a stiffness still in our movements and in our hearts. I have a simple idea that in gathering ourselves as a community for whatever's ahead, it would be useful to gather the stories of what has been happening to us. Some of these will be hard to listen to and some hard to tell, but I'm suggesting that we begin to gather those across the range as a way of starting to piece together what is happening to us, as a means towards weaving a better future story." In subsequent years, many individuals, communities, and organisations began to do just that: share, listen to, record, and make available personal stories of those who have lived through and been affected by the conflict. In the past 2 decades, many have chosen to participate in projects which have sought to humanise the history of the conflict and subsequent peace process, and there's now a real diversity of experiences which has been shared and placed on public record for future generations. I can't do justice to this diversity in the short time available. However, I wish to share some reflections on the type of work which has been undertaken and the motivations for those that have engaged in this work. My observations are based on 2 pieces of research which I conducted in 2005 and again in 2013. The first was an audit of storytelling projects, which was conducted on behalf of Healing Through Remembering, a diverse membership-led organisation which explores and advocates for approaches to dealing with the past in Northern Ireland. The second piece was undertaken in early 2013 as part of this Accounts of the Conflict project in order to fill in the gap in our knowledge around what storytelling gathering projects have taken place subsequent to the first audit. In the course of these 2 pieces of research, I identified over 70 individual projects which were collecting stories. These ranged from small community-based initiatives, which were collecting perhaps 10 or 20 stories of those that they had direct contact with, to more wider-scale projects which had a geographical or thematic focus and were collecting hundreds rather than dozens of stories. For some projects were interested in the experience of those that had particular occupations during the conflict, including nurses, security forces, bus workers, prison tutors, and others, while others focused on particular geographical areas, including the border region, a rural town or village, or an urban area which was particularly impacted by conflict-related events. A number of projects adopted a life history approach, allowing the storyteller to share those aspects of their lives that they wish to focus on. Others were more focused, concentrating on themes such as bereavement and loss, imprisonment, resilience, mixed marriages, injury, courage, and many more. While many were solely community-led, there have been a number of academic-led projects, as well as some innovative academic community partnerships which have sought to draw on the strengths of both approaches. It's important to note that some storytelling projects have focused on sharing stories within person-centred group processes, with no intention of documenting or recording those stories for a wider audience. And it's important to acknowledge the level of work which has been undertaken in that regard. As I wrote back in the audit in 2005, it's tempting to distinguish between projects that focus on the process of storytelling and those that focus on the end product. Although a substantial number of projects resulted in the development of a product, all initiatives placed a degree of emphasis on the process of engaging with the storyteller, creating an environment in which they were comfortable telling their story, and ensuring that it was a positive experience for the teller. This, I believe, still remains the case. But as Gillian said, those tangible products resulting from storytelling projects have taken many forms, including audio and audiovisual recordings, full and edited transcripts, publications, both short and long, exhibitions, documentaries and films, creative works, including quilts, stained glass windows, ceramics, memory boxes, mosaics, and others, and stage-based dramas. While there have been examples of audio-visual recording for quite some time, as with the broader field of oral history, this method has become increasingly common with the advancements and increasing accessibility of digital technologies. The motivations for the collections of these stories has also been diverse and often overlapping. Some projects have explained to me that the impetus for undertaking to record people's experiences comes from a desire to advocate for some form of social change, utilising personal accounts as a means of demonstrating the impact of the conflict on individuals' lives and provide first-hand evidence for the need for truth and justice mechanisms, or to illustrate the requirement for therapeutic, financial, or practical support for those most affected by the conflict. Others are motivated by a desire to place these personal accounts on historical record, while others are focused on the educational benefits which can be derived from using individual accounts to inform people of the impact of the conflict. Others focus on the potential healing and therapeutic benefits for the storyteller, which can be derived from sharing their story and having it heard, acknowledged, and respected. Some organisations view storytelling as one of a range of services which they provide to individuals, and a means by which people may begin to engage with that organisation, and as they build more trust and confidence, avail themselves of other services, such as counselling or advocacy and justice-seeking work, which the organisation may also provide. It has been interesting to observe the development of work in this field over the past decades, and to note the increasing attention being paid to both the practical aspects of collecting stories and the range of ethical issues associated with such sensitive work. This has been due in part to significant formal and informal networking, sharing and cross-pollination of practices between projects, greater levels of resourcing available, and the development of training programmes to guide and inform those interested in this work. I've observed a much greater awareness and sensitivity to issues such as informed consent, the centrality of the storyteller to the process, and the storage and archiving of data. Most recently, the landscape of this work has changed considerably since the Peace and Reconciliation Programme issued a specific call for storytelling projects in 2009. and funded some large-scale projects to collect as well as archive stories. Focusing very briefly on archiving, in both 2005 and again in 2013, I asked projects what plans they had put in place for the long-term cataloguing and archiving of materials. It must be said that a small number of projects have placed the establishment of their own archive at the heart of their work, with varying degrees of public accessibility built into their particular model. A small number of projects have deposited materials in established libraries or existing archives. Others, it must be said, have difficulty with depositing sensitive material within some existing institutions for practical, historical, and political reasons. For the majority of the projects, it appears that the long-term and secure storage of materials represented a real challenge, as they were often working within limited resources and inadequate knowledge of the technical and legal aspects of archiving. But proposals for the establishment of a central repository for stories have been mooted for some time, from such diverse places as Healing Through Remembering in 2002, the Northern Ireland Select Committee in 2005, the Victims and Survivors Forum in 2013, and later that same year in the Haas-O'Sullivan proposals. The work of accounts is to create a usable infrastructure based on principles of inclusivity, transparency, and professionalism, into which existing storytelling projects and individuals might seek to deposit their materials in a central place. We are delighted that a range of projects have agreed to work in partnership with us and will form a growing collection of those deposited within the archive. And I suppose to say finally, it's not possible to place an exact figure on the number of personal accounts or oral histories that have been collected as part of dedicated storytelling projects, as opposed to more journalistic approaches, of which there are many, of course. But we do know that it certainly runs into several thousands. It's important to acknowledge the diversity of people's experiences that have already been documented, as well as to note that not everyone might wish to or feel safe or comfortable in sharing their personal experience in a more public setting, or feel that if they did share those experiences, they would be well received. To conclude, what we do know is that there's a wealth of local knowledge and experience which has been built up within a range of communities, and there are many who are now well equipped to support people in beginning the process of articulating their experiences, whether privately, in small group settings, or more publicly. We are fortunate that there are many who've developed these skills and sensitivity to continue this work into the future, and are aware of the need to place the storyteller at the heart of any processes being undertaken.